The film begins with a voice-over from a man telling the story of giant creatures called troll. In the past, these creatures used to live side by side with humans. That is until a new monarch, King Olaf, invoked religious decree to forcefully expel every single troll from the gloomy forest and push them out into the bright sunlight, causing them all to turn into stone. Olaf and his army even continued to hunt down and kill both troll children and adults to end the reign of those giant creatures. Now, this particular narrative was recounted by the father to young Nora, as little Nora habitually listened to her dad's tales concerning the trolls during her childhood years.
Var det ingen som hjalp trollet da?
Fortsettelsen følger.
Lover du?
30 years later, Nora, who has retired from all her activities, is now at a certain location. It was at a certain time that she received a visit from her longtime friend, Andreas, who is presently employed working alongside the government officials. The reason Andreas has come here is to request Nora's assistance in looking into an unusual case that concerns a troll that has only recently been found.
Likt det jeg har lyst til å vise til deg også.
Mener du? Mer?
From there, Nora was taken to Vemorg, a hydroelectric power area in the Norwegian region, the location where a troll was discovered and is presently undergoing a thorough research process. Nora encountered two professors, whose names are Moller and Wangel, and they promptly escorted her toward a specific room. As they walked along, Moller explained that this legendary troll being had in fact been discovered a long time ago, dating back to the period of the Second World War, at which time the Vemorg area was used as a place to build weapons while simultaneously thwarting Germany's plans. However, in reality, all of that was done to cover up the actual activities. After they successfully discovered it a century ago, this being was subsequently given the name Jotun. However, Andreas preferred to name the creature before them as Mega Troll. Since the incident that occurred 3 years in the past, they have been anticipating security issues by positioning ultraviolet light sources surrounding the creature as a measure of preparedness. Not long after, a professor who was also the person responsible for this location, named Marion, subsequently arrived and clarified that the troll remained in a state of dormancy, and the sole piece of information they could ascertain was its pulse, which was still actively beating. Nora was subsequently escorted to the upper floor where she encountered Siggy, who has since married Andreas and is now in the late stages of pregnancy. Following that, Andreas proceeded to display an ancient copied fragment that originated from the time when Sign Olaf held power. Upon seeing that sign, Nora truly felt that the tale concerning how Olaf managed to expel all the trolls was actually accurate. Nevertheless, even with this evidence, the professors and all the other team members present still harbor concerns that there could be additional trolls lurking somewhere outside. Due to the emergence of that initial troll, coupled with the one they are presently investigating, there is a significant probability that numerous other trolls exist who might eventually emerge to the surface and unleash their fury to exact their revenge. Therefore, they must prepare to anticipate everything. The issue, however, is that because they have yet to discover a truly effective method, Andreas decided to bring Nora along for their investigation on this particular occasion.
Allt det här bara lite...
Having listened to everything, Nora, who was quite shocked, then proceeded to the restroom in order to compose her mind. However, at the very moment she was doing that, Nora unexpectedly discovered and stepped into a forbidden zone exclusively accessible to the staff members. Upon successfully entering, Nora approached this giant troll figure that was currently asleep. With a gradual movement, she then made contact with it, and without any doubt whatsoever, Nora proceeded to sing the troll lullaby that her mother used to perform when Nora was just a small child, at which point, something subsequently occurred.
Nattvakning. Standby.
As they prepared to unleash the ultraviolet rays, Professor Marion refused to destroy the creature, and the consequence of that decision was that it only made the troll before them grow even more aggressive. Once the creature was free, every military unit immediately mobilized, sending Nora, Andreas, Siggy, and Marion by air to rendezvous with their longtime acquaintance, Major Christopher, who arrived with the orders to escort them to an audience with the Prime Minister. They met and immediately held an emergency meeting. Here the Prime Minister stated that he knew how valuable the research conducted by Andreas and his friends was, including the efforts of Professor Marion, who intended to control Megatroll. Nevertheless, the Prime Minister could not turn a blind eye to the fact that the lives of the populace were currently under severe threat. Consequently, he reluctantly commanded the military forces to annihilate Megatroll with the utmost urgency. When ready, Nora, who was determined to participate in the mission, initially faced refusal since Chris believed this particular mission was significantly different and much more perilous than prior ones, but upon recalling the entirety of their history and past efforts, Chris ultimately consented to include Nora alongside Andreas and naturally Marion, who earnestly begged to accompany them. In the meantime, at a skiing venue, guests were observed actively participating in merrymaking. At this location, the visitors had not yet realized the peril that was imminent and about to reach them. At the same time, Chris and the others who had arrived at the location immediately attacked using ultraviolet rays. The attack succeeded in burning the Megatroll's skin, causing it pain. However, regrettably, that Megatroll fought back by hurling a structural support beam directly at a helicopter, resulting in its immediate downfall and subsequent utter destruction. Having lost his comrade, Chris, feeling utterly helpless, could do nothing more than observe the colossal monster glaring at them, filled with profound animosity. At this moment, their only recourse is to devise an alternative strategy and patiently wait for the subsequent directive to be issued by the governmental bodies. While observing the helicopter wreckage, Nora and Professor Marion engaged in a small debate, where Marion just realized that the troll was actually a very ferocious creature. While Nora disagreed, because in her opinion this one troll was different from the Troll King they had faced before, given that the former troll's sole desire was simply to return to its own dwelling. So, their argument sparked an idea for Andrea, leading her to inquire whether Nora possessed the ability to communicate with the troll. Upon hearing this suggestion, Nora had an intriguing thought, leading her to guide the entire group away to the Dovre Mountains, which happens to be the very location that the first troll who ever appeared had previously visited. Legend says this location was designated as a hunting ground when Saint Olaf and his soldiers deliberately abducted the Troll King's offspring to draw him out to this very place. Nora actually believes that if the Troll King successfully escaped and got out 3 years in the past, then his child is probably still confined within these mountains. Upon arriving at the ravine inside the cave, Nora used a stone to tap the ground surface several times, which immediately succeeded in awakening the Troll King's offspring.
Legg vekk det våpenet. Ikke lys ham rett i øynene. Aldri ro.
Nora, possessing knowledge about the troll, then moved closer and gently touched the creature's body with her hand. Following that, she slowly attempted to establish communication by singing the very same melody. Nora's actions were seemingly met with a friendly expression from the troll, a creature that Nora subsequently decided to name Beautiful, or we can just call him Handsome. Now, after explaining that their arrival was to ask for help, they finally prepared to lure the Megatroll, which was currently on its way. Once all preparations were complete, Nora shot the flare gun to draw the Megatroll's focus, simultaneously acting as a marker for Handsome to reveal his presence. But strangely, as the two beings attempted to communicate, the Megatroll appeared resistant to listening, causing the enormous monster to forcefully strike the ground with its foot.
Jeg tror vi skal starte opp.
Following the failure of their initial plan, they subsequently gathered again to deliberate on the subsequent course of action. In the midst of their desperation, Professor Marion, while observing the movement patterns of Megatroll, suddenly recognized that the path the creature was taking actually mirrored the route taken by the pilgrims, specifically proceeding toward an area designated as Trondheim, situated in the northern part of the region. Upon realizing this fact, Nora was suddenly reminded of her father's tale concerning the troll's journey, particularly the instance when Saint Olaf perpetrated the Great Slaughter. He exerted his authority in the capital city of Trondheim, which is Nidaros, leading Nora to finally understand that Megatroll's objective in traveling to that specific area was to exact vengeance. When they got to Trondheim, a woman named Esther welcomed them. Esther was extremely familiar with the past actions of Nora's deceased father. After that, they were led directly to the Nidaros Cathedral so they could search for the clue that was supposedly at the tomb of Saint Olaf. And it is said that this tomb is actually situated down in the underground chamber. From the moment the digging started right up to the present day, Esther and her team have failed to discover even one piece of evidence concerning the location of that specific tomb. But on this occasion, it was due to an accidental thing that Andreas did. They finally managed to discover a clue after noticing 3 openings in the wall right where the image of Saint Olaf was situated.
Jeg tror, man ødelagt for færre, den her.
Prøv med den her. Så.
Once they located the chest, they proceeded to open it, and for the first time ever, they could finally see the individual known as Olaf. Here, unexpectedly, they discovered a piece of paper on Saint Olaf's body. Understanding that this was a fragment from an old manuscript, they proceeded to photograph it and forward it to Siggy so it could be merged with the remaining sections. From the outcome of piecing those fragments together, a fact was uncovered. Saint Olaf never intended to expel the troll population, whereas Olaf actually wanted to give the trolls the Jotunheim territory as their place to live. But since the church leadership was opposed to this decision, Olaf was subsequently executed, resulting in the trolls remaining banished and annihilated for all time. Understanding that Megatroll's goal was to exact vengeance upon the descendants who established this country, Nora then announced their findings to the whole world, and that news subsequently generated a wide array of different reactions. In the middle of this situation, the president commanded Chris and the rest to quickly retreat as the military forces are currently advancing on the city of Trondheim. But even after receiving the directive, Nora and everyone present here seemingly declined to fall back, as they are determined to keep trying to discover a method to permanently halt this catastrophe. Recalling stories from her youth, Nora had heard the legend about Olaf managing to vanquish a troll by employing a blade forged from silver material. However, upon synthesizing all the available information, it was determined that the troll could not be defeated by a silver-based sword, but rather the holy water source located near the tomb of Saint Olaf. Having ensured they possessed an adequate stock of the sacred water, Major Chris and Professor Marion then requested assistance from the local inhabitants to join the fight with them and collect the spring sources found at Saint Olaf's tomb. Later that evening, just as everyone was prepared, Megatroll finally made his way into the city. Once they were within range, Andreas and Esther immediately sounded the church bells, which at that very moment caused Megatroll significant auditory distress. From that vantage point, Chris then commanded his subordinates to launch the artillery shells that had been augmented with blessed holy water. But unfortunately, all those efforts seemed to only make the monster even more aggressive. But in the middle of the unfolding chaos and panic, a loud roar suddenly echoed from the distance, which, as it turned out, originated from the good-looking fellow who was surprisingly still alive. When he found out that the good-looking guy appeared bruised and beaten, Andreas came up with a plan to assist him. Since holy water has no effect on the outer layer of the skin, Andreas then conceived the idea of inserting the holy water, which was encased in silver and also explosives, into Megatroll's mouth. Then, assisted by Chris, Andreas rapidly boarded the helicopter and took off flying towards the site of the fight. But unfortunately, during the journey, the detonator he was clutching actually dropped, which meant they were compelled to set off the explosion manually. Since there were no options left, Andreas decided to sacrifice himself. Prior to taking action, he first telephoned his wife in order to bid her farewell for the final time.
Hva mener du?
Pappa var...
After that event occurred, the government initiated the reconstruction of every single facility that had been demolished. In the meantime, Siggy delivered a baby girl, and eventually, they all lived happily ever after with that handsome fellow who was wandering around completely unrestrained. But at the very moment everyone assumed that catastrophe had ended for good, Professor Mahler, that researcher who first encountered Nora earlier on, turned out to have successfully rescued one small troll specimen from the laboratory complex that had been completely ruined by them. That concludes the storyline of the film Troll 2, which premiered just this month. We truly hope that you all found our narrative this time around to be satisfying. We extend our gratitude to everyone who watched, and we look forward to seeing you again during the next opportunity.